Ancient records speak of magnificent cities that no one can find. This video will take you on a journey to uncover 15 of these vanished places, from legendary capitals of gold to desert ports swallowed by sand. By the end, you will see history not as a fixed story, but as a living puzzle where the greatest chapters are still missing. How does an entire metropolis, documented by scholars and mapped by travelers, simply disappear from the earth? What forgotten truth lies beneath the tale of a city punished by a desert storm or a paradise hidden in a mountain valley? If you could join one search for a lost world, which mystery would call to you most? A city does not vanish in a day. It fades slowly, like a story told too many times until the details blur and the truth becomes uncertain. One moment, a metropolis thrives at a river's bend or a mountain pass, its streets alive with voices and commerce. The next, centuries later, all that remains are silent stones half buried in sand or swallowed by relentless green. This disappearance is not a magic trick, but a quiet, complex unraveling. It is a process woven from three powerful threads: the changing earth, the rise and fall of human power, and the fragile nature of memory itself. Consider the environment first. Archaeologists like David Keyes point out that shifts in climate have ended more cities than any army ever could. A river that once gave life might change its course, leaving fields to wither. A once fertile region might slowly turn to desert, its people forced to walk away from their homes in search of water. Rising sea levels can swallow coastal ports whole, leaving only legends of a drowned kingdom. These are not sudden catastrophes, but slow, relentless pressures that empty a city street by street, home by home. Then there is the human element. Conquest can erase a city's identity, as new rulers build their own monuments over the old and give the place a new name until the original is forgotten. Sometimes a city is simply abandoned after a political collapse, its people scattering to safer lands. In other cases, a newer city is built directly on top of the old one, layer upon layer, until the founding settlement is buried and lost even to local memory. This leads us to the most fragile thread of all, the story itself. Without written records or a continuous line of people to tell its tale, a city's memory fades. Its true name is forgotten, replaced by myth. Its location becomes a matter of rumor and speculation. If your own hometown was emptied today, how many generations would pass before its grid of streets and the purpose of its buildings became a mystery for future historians to debate? This is the nature of loss. It is not merely a place being hidden, but the story of that place being slowly unwritten from the world. With this understanding of how a city can slip from history's grasp, our quest begins. We turn to the first and perhaps greatest of all these legendary blanks on the map, a name that has echoed for thousands of years as the ultimate symbol of a vanished world: Atlantis. The legend of Iram of the Pillars begins with a whisper on the desert wind. For over 1,000 years, storytellers have spoken of a metropolis of unparalleled splendor, its skyline defined by soaring towers that scraped the heavens, built by a tribe called the Ad. According to the Quran, its people grew arrogant from their wealth and power, turning away from faith, and as a consequence, the city was utterly erased. A cataclysmic sandstorm was said to have descended, swallowing Iram whole and leaving no trace for travelers. This was not just a story of loss, but of a deliberate, divine punishment that made the city a permanent cautionary tale. Yet the descriptions are startlingly specific. The 8th century historian Al-Hamdani wrote of its location in southern Arabia, and pre-Islamic poetry vividly recounts its grandeur. How could a place documented with such detail simply not exist? This conflict between rich textual evidence and a complete lack of physical proof sits at the heart of the mystery. Some scholars argue Iram was never a single city. but a powerful metaphor for the fate of all civilizations that succumb to hubris. Others propose it was a real confederation of wealthy trading outposts along the frankincense route, their collective memory condensed into one legendary name. This theory gained thrilling traction in the 1990s when archaeologists, using satellite imagery and ancient maps, identified the remains of a significant settlement in Oman. This site, often called Yubar, showed evidence of a sudden collapse, quite possibly into a sinkhole, a natural event that could easily transform into a story of a city swallowed by the earth. While a remarkable find, Yubar does not match the full, towering description of Iram's pillars, so the discovery solved one puzzle while deepening another. It proved a major desert trading hub could vanish, but left the iconic legend still floating just beyond our grasp. Iram stands as a powerful first example of how a lost city lives in two worlds, the tangible realm of archaeology and the enduring realm of story. This dance between myth and history becomes even more tantalizing when the stories speak not of sand, but of solid gold. The legend of Iram shows how a story can be born from the desert, but our next lost city was forged in the fires of human desire. This is the tale of El Dorado, the Gilded One, a story that began with a single, shimmering ritual and grew into a phantom that would haunt explorers for centuries. Far from the Arabian sands, in the misty highlands of the Andes, the Muisca people practiced a ceremony for a new leader. As described by Spanish chroniclers, the chosen man would be covered in resin and then dusted with fine gold powder, becoming a living sun god. He would then raft to the center of Lake Guatavita and offer treasures to the waters, washing the gold from his body. This was El Dorado, not a place but a person, the Golden One. Yet when the Spanish, their minds already fevered with dreams of wealth, heard this account, they transformed it. The man became a city, the ritual became a kingdom, and a cultural practice became a map to limitless treasure. Chroniclers like Juan de Castellanos wrote elaborate accounts of this golden realm, placing it deep in the uncharted jungle, and with each retelling its splendor grew. The search for El Dorado became an obsession that reshaped the world. Historians like John Hemming detail how this single legend drove countless expeditions into the heart of South America, leading to immense hardship, conflict with indigenous peoples, and the tragic loss of life. Men marched into green hells, driven by a mirage of gold that always seemed to lie just beyond the next river. In time, the myth began to merge with another, more plausible mystery, the lost city of Paititi. This was said to be a final refuge of the Inca, a hidden sanctuary where they fled with their remaining treasures from the Spanish conquest. Unlike the purely mythical El Dorado, Paititi is based on historical whispers and likely has a basis in reality, a remote settlement that was abandoned and reclaimed by the jungle. The quest for both became intertwined, a double-layered mystery of greed and survival. This obsession did not end with the age of conquistadors. It reached a haunting crescendo in the 20th century with the disappearance of Percy Fawcett. A British explorer convinced by his own research, Fawcett sought a lost city he called Z deep in the Amazon. His expedition vanished without a trace in 1925, becoming one of exploration's greatest enduring mysteries. His story illustrates a profound shift. The search was no longer just for gold, but for lost glory, for a forgotten chapter of human achievement. The dream of El Dorado, in the end, speaks less about a city of gold and more about the human heart, our capacity for wonder, our destructive greed, and our endless yearning to find a paradise just out of reach. But what if the next lost city was not sought for its material wealth, but for something far more precious, the sacred knowledge of the divine? Gold and sacred knowledge are powerful lures, but sometimes a lost city promises a different kind of refuge. Deep within the vast, silent expanse of the Libyan desert, a different legend took root. Medieval Arabic texts like the 15th century Book of Hidden Pearls speak not of a golden king, but of a white-walled oasis called Zerzura. This was described as a hidden paradise, its gates guarded by sleeping giants, but its true treasure was said to be a library, a trove of ancient books and wisdom waiting within. Unlike the vague jungles of El Dorado, Zerzura came with tantalizingly specific directions. It was said to lie west of the Nile, near a mountain that resembled a bird's beak. For centuries, these clues were little more than a campfire story for caravan travelers, but in the early 20th century, they sparked a very modern quest. With the advent of the automobile, the desert became a new frontier for exploration. Adventurers like Ralph Bagnold, a British Army officer and pioneer of desert travel, led motorized expeditions into the Great Sand Sea. They navigated oceans of dunes in modified Model T Fords, driven by the conviction that a real settlement must lie behind the myth. They followed the ancient clues, scanning the horizon for that telltale beak-shaped peak, hoping to see the legendary white walls rise from the heat haze. Yet, after countless miles of arduous travel, they found only endless, empty desert. The gleaming city of books remained stubbornly absent, so what were they searching for? Historians and archaeologists now suggest Zerzura may represent a collective memory of a real phenomenon. During wetter climatic periods, the now barren Libyan desert was dotted with seasonal lakes and fertile valleys. Small communities could thrive there. As the climate dried over centuries, these oases vanished, and the people who lived there moved on or were lost to time. The stories of these green, welcoming places, the last stops before a deadly expanse of sand, could have condensed over generations into the single, perfect legend of Zerzura. It was a mirage of memory, a story born from the very real human experience of finding life in the desert, and then watching it disappear. The dream of a library in the sands speaks to our deepest yearning for preservation, for a place where knowledge survives even when civilizations fall. But what happens when the force of disappearance is not a slow, creeping drought, but a single, catastrophic event from which no one returns to tell the tale? This leads us from the burning desert to the cold, deep embrace of the sea. The desert's mirages are one thing, but the sea's hunger is absolute. Off the wild, wind-swept coast of medieval England, a different kind of city met its end, not in myth, but in full view of history. This is the story of Ravenser, a bustling port town that thrived on the edge of the world and was then methodically erased by it. Founded in the early 13th century on a spit of land at the mouth of the Humber River, Ravenser quickly grew notorious. Royal charters granted it status, and it became a vital hub, known as much for its legitimate trade as for the piracy its ships allegedly practiced against passing vessels. For over a century, it was a lively, prosperous, and decidedly rough frontier of the sea, but its foundation was its fatal flaw. The spit it was built upon was transient, a temporary gift of shifting sands and currents. By the mid-14th century, the great storms that regularly battered the North Sea coast began their relentless work. Contemporary chronicles describe the town's desperate plight with startling clarity. Records show the townspeople themselves petitioning the king, describing how the sea was consuming their marketplace, their homes, and their very streets with each passing tempest. They pleaded for tax relief and aid, a poignant testament to watching their world dissolve wave by wave. Maritime archaeologists studying the region confirm this was a perfect storm of coastal erosion and rising sea levels. The very forces that deposited the land had simply changed their mind, reclaiming it. By the 1360s, the last structures had slipped beneath the grey waters. Today, not a single stone remains above the surface to mark where Ravenser once stood. Its story is a powerful reminder that a city can be fully documented, legally recognized, and vividly remembered by its own people, and still vanish from the physical earth. It represents a literal erosion of history, a loss witnessed in real time but ultimately unstoppable. This forces a sobering question. If a city can be unmade by the indifferent force of nature, what happens when the force of destruction is not the sea, but us? Ravenser was erased by the sea, a slow-motion tragedy witnessed by its own inhabitants. But what of a civilization that vanished so completely its very existence was nearly relegated to myth? On the sun-baked plains of southern Spain, a name echoes from the ancient Mediterranean world, Tartessos. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote of it with awe, describing a sophisticated and staggeringly wealthy kingdom at the very edge of the known world. This was not a backwater, but a major trading partner of the Phoenicians, those master merchants of antiquity. Tartessos controlled legendary silver mines, its riches flowing into the networks that fueled the rise of classical civilizations. Herodotus even named its long-lived king Arganthonius, whose very name meant silver man. Here was a culture documented by its peers, integrated into the economic heartbeat of the age. And then it was simply gone. The accounts dry up. The once great capital, presumably a city of power and splendor, disappears from all records. How does a society so deeply woven into the fabric of its time unravel without leaving a clear thread for history to follow? The mystery of Tartessos is not a lack of stories, but a profound gap between those stories and the ground beneath our feet. Theories abound, each a possible chapter in a silent history. Some scholars point to conflict, suggesting the rising power of Carthage, a Phoenician colony turned empire, may have deliberately dismantled its rival to control the lucrative Spanish silver trade. Others look to the land itself. The heart of Tartessian territory is the vast, marshy delta of the Guadalquivir River. What if environmental change, a shift in the river's course or catastrophic flooding, slowly drowned the urban center, forcing its people to disperse and their capital to be swallowed by mud and reeds? This last theory holds particular weight for modern archaeologists. The search today is less for gleaming towers and more for subtle, waterlogged clues beneath the wetlands. The leading hypothesis is that the primary Tartessian city lies perfectly preserved, buried under centuries of silt in the Marisma de Hinojos. Finding it would be an archaeological triumph, but it requires peering through layers of earth and water to find a place that history remembers but geography has hidden. The reflective question Tartessos poses is deeply unsettling for how we understand the past. How can a culture leave behind intricate gold jewelry and evidence of a unique written script, yet have its central place of power remain one of Europe's greatest archaeological blanks? It suggests that even the most connected and prosperous societies are fragile, their stories vulnerable to being overwritten by time, conflict, or the slow, patient hunger of the earth itself. From this vanished European trading power, our search turns south to a legendary African metropolis whose towers were said to rival the clouds. The story of Tartessos is a puzzle of wealth and silence, but some lost cities are defined not by their silence, but by the foundational stories they leave behind. For the mighty Aztec Empire, whose capital of Tenochtitlan amazed the Spanish conquerors, every story of power began with a humble origin. Their own histories, painted in codices like the Boccherini, tell of a long migration. They depict their ancestors departing from an island shrouded in mist and memory, a place they called Aztlán, the land of whiteness or the place of herons. This was not a city of gold, but a spiritual birthplace described as a tranquil island in a lake, abundant with white reeds and graceful birds. Its significance is profound. Aztlán was the cultural and spiritual womb from which the Aztec people believed they emerged, the point of departure that gave their entire civilization a sense of destiny and purpose. To find Aztlán would be to touch the very beginning of their story. But can you find a place that exists primarily in the heart? Mesoamerican scholars have long debated this. Some argue Aztlán was a real geographical location, a homeland in the north from which the Nahua peoples migrated over centuries. Others see it as an ideological construct, a perfect mythical origin point created to legitimize the Aztec state, much like a founding myth for a nation. A compelling middle ground suggests it could have been a later ceremonial center, a place that symbolically represented the homeland. This theory points to places like the island town of Mexcalteton on Mexico's west coast, whose layout and watery surroundings eerily match the descriptions of an island city of canals and causeways. The challenge in pinpointing Aztlán lies in its poetic, symbolic descriptions. The codices speak in metaphors of caves, mountains, and herons, language meant to convey spiritual meaning more than precise cartography. Was it an actual island, or was island a metaphor for a place of purity set apart from the world? This ambiguity did not stop the search. In fact, the legend of Aztlán had powerful consequences far beyond Aztec memory. When the Spanish arrived, they seized upon these stories. Hearing tales of a glorious origin land to the north, they believed it must be another wealthy kingdom to conquer. This belief fueled numerous expeditions north from Mexico into the deserts of what is now the American Southwest, driving explorers like Francisco Vázquez de Coronado in his fruitless quest for the mythical 7 cities of Cibola. In a twist of history, the search for a spiritual homeland helped map a continent. The enduring quest for Aztlán, therefore, speaks to a universal human need, the need for a beginning. It contrasts sharply with a city that was lost not at its dawn, but at its dazzling, terrifying peak. The Aztec origin myth sent explorers searching for a spiritual homeland, but the Vikings left behind remarkably practical directions to a place of real, tangible abundance. Norse sagas, those epic family histories written down centuries later, speak not of gods or golden kings, but of good land for settling. In the saga of the Greenlanders, we hear of Leif Eriksson's journey west from Greenland, past a barren stone slab he named Helluland and a wooded coast he called Markland. Finally, his crew reached a place so generous it seemed a gift from the land itself. They named it Vinland, and within it, they established a seasonal camp they called Hóp. The description is not vague legend, but a settler's detailed report. The sagas tell of a sheltered bay where they could sail their ship far inland at high tide, of meadows with self-sown wheat for baking, and of vines heavy with grapes. It was, the text states plainly, a place where no winter frost came to harm the grass, and where each day was of more equal length than in Greenland or Iceland. This was a Norse paradise, a logistical dream for a people always pushing against the limits of their harsh environment. Yet, for all its vivid detail, Hóp has never been conclusively found. The challenge begins with the sagas themselves. There are 2 main versions, the saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red, and they don't always agree on the sequence of events or the specific descriptions of places. This has led to centuries of scholarly debate. Is Hóp in Newfoundland, where the only confirmed Norse site in the Americas, Elant's Ox Meadows, was discovered? That site proves the Vikings reached North America, but it lacks the specific geographical features of the Hóp description, like that unique tidal bay. Could Hóp be farther south, in New England, where wild grapes actually grow in abundance? The saga's mention of self-sown wheat is likely referring to wild rice or a similar grass, which also points to a more temperate, southerly location. Each theory fits some clues while contradicting others. The search is further complicated by the nature of Hóp itself. It was not a permanent city, but a seasonal camp, a base for exploring, logging, and perhaps gathering valuable resources like timber and grapes to take back to Greenland. Such a temporary settlement would leave only the faintest of archaeological footprints, a hearthstone, a broken tool, evidence quickly reclaimed by the forest. Without a clear, permanent structure, finding it is like looking for a single, centuries-old campsite in a continent of wilderness. The quotes from the sagas paint the clearest picture we have. They describe pulling their ship into a lake, setting up houses, and exploring the area. They encountered indigenous peoples, interactions that ranged from trade to conflict, which ultimately made the Norse decide the land, for all its bounty, was too dangerous to settle permanently. This is the core of the mystery of Hóp. It is perhaps the best documented lost site in this series, with a clear historical context and a known culture behind it, yet its physical location remains just out of reach. It represents not a grand civilization that fell, but a fleeting opportunity that was grasped and then let go. The Vikings found their land of plenty, used it, and then withdrew, leaving only a story in a saga and a ghost of a campsite on a distant shore. This pattern of contact and retreat echoes on a much grander scale with a city that did not fade from a saga, but from the entire memory of a continent, a place where European and Asian legends once converged. The Vikings left Hóp behind, but some cities were abandoned not by choice, but by the slow death of the roads that fed them. Deep in the Sahara, far from any sea, the fate of a city was written in the shifting paths of camel caravans. This brings us to the walled oasis of Ganasa. Do not confuse it with the great Ghana Empire to the south. This was a specific, fortified city, a vital node in the immense network of medieval trans-Saharan trade. Arab geographers like al-Bakri, writing in the 11th century, documented it as a thriving stop where gold from the south met salt from the north, a place of commerce and security in an ocean of sand. Ganasa was not a legend but a reported fact of economic life, and then the caravans stopped coming. The disappearance of Ganasa is a textbook case of how a city can die from isolation. When political turmoil or the discovery of a safer, more efficient route redirects the flow of wealth, a trading hub can wither in a generation. The very sands that brought it prosperity begin to reclaim its empty streets. The search for its ruins, however, reveals the frustrating gap between historical record and physical reality. The clues are maddeningly vague. Al-Bakri and others give only general directions, like south of Sijilmassa, another great trading city. This leaves a vast, uncharted territory of dunes and rock. For centuries, these oral histories and scant coordinates have led explorers on fruitless treks, following mirages of memory. In the modern era, archaeologists have tried to pin it down by identifying sites that fit the general profile. One leading candidate is Tegdayost in modern-day Mauritania. Excavations there have revealed a substantial medieval settlement with evidence of trade, but scholars debate whether it truly matches the specific descriptions of Ganasa's fortifications and layout. It may be a related settlement or perhaps a different city entirely, showing how a single archaeological discovery can deepen a mystery as easily as solve it. The silent fate of Ganasa forces a profound reflection. It shows that a city can vanish not from a cataclysm, but from a simple, quiet change in the map. When the last camel train passed by and took a different turn into the dunes, the lifeblood of the community slowly drained away. Its walls, built to protect treasure, eventually stood guard over nothing but dust and forgetting. This pattern of a thriving center fading into obscurity finds a haunting parallel far to the east, where an entire civilization of immense sophistication left behind wonders of engineering, yet managed to hide its very heart from history. The silent fate of a desert trading hub shows how a city can be erased by a simple change on the map. But what if a city was never meant to be found on any ordinary map at all? High in the thin air of the Himalayas, beyond the reach of conquistadors and treasure hunters, lies a different kind of mystery. Ancient Tibetan Buddhist texts speak not of gold or conquest, but of sanctuary. They describe a hidden valley paradise known as Kwenlung, sometimes called the Silver Palace of the Goddess. This was not a city to be plundered, but a refuge to be earned. In times of great conflict or spiritual decline, sacred scrolls and guidebooks were composed, detailing the paths to these secret places known as Baal, hidden lands believed to be created by the great sage Padmasambhava. These texts are astonishingly specific. They might describe a series of valleys guarded by snow leopards, a passage behind a waterfall, or a meadow where flowers bloom in perpetual summer. The scrolls promise that within Quenlung one would find a self-sufficient world, a pure land where the environment itself supports the enlightened mind. The miraculous features are catalogued with care: healing springs, caves that amplify meditation, and fruits that nourish the body for weeks. Yet, for all their geographical detail, these guidebooks were never intended as simple treasure maps. They were written in a symbolic language, a code meant to be deciphered only by those who had reached a certain level of spiritual preparedness. The journey to a Baal is described as an inner pilgrimage as much as an outer one. The physical obstacles, the treacherous cliffs, the hidden passes, are also metaphors for the practitioner's own mental and moral barriers. This creates a fascinating puzzle for historians and explorers alike. Is Quenlung a real physical location, a valley so remote and protected by geography that it has remained isolated for centuries? Or is it a profound allegory, a map of the enlightened state itself, never meant to be walked with earthly feet? Many scholars, like anthropologist Ian Baker, who has written extensively on Tibetan exploration, suggest it is likely both. The concept is rooted in the very real geography of the Himalayas, a region pocketed with inaccessible valleys that have indeed sheltered communities during times of invasion. The stories give these places a sacred dimension, transforming them from mere hideouts into realms of spiritual promise. The reflective question this poses is deeply beautiful. In searching for Quenlung, are we missing the point? The ancient texts suggest the valley reveals itself only when the seeker is ready, implying that its ultimate discovery is a personal transformation. This shifts the entire paradigm of the lost city from an object to be found to an experience to be realized. It challenges our modern archaeological mindset, asking us if some truths are not buried in the ground, but waiting in the relationship between a sacred landscape and a prepared heart. From this ethereal Himalayan sanctuary, our search descends once more into the tangible, pressing heat of the jungle, where a metropolis of staggering scale was consumed not by allegory, but by relentless green. The search for a hidden Himalayan valley asks us to see with more than our eyes, but in the sweltering rainforests of South America, the challenge was far more physical. Here, the quest for El Dorado led men not to gold, but to a different kind of phantom, a metropolis of staggering size that left no stone behind. This is the lost city of Mayapures. In the late 16th century, the aging conquistador Antonio de Barrio, and later the famed English courtier Sir Walter Raleigh, pushed deep into the unmapped jungles of the Orinoco Basin, fueled by the same golden dream. Yet from indigenous guides and their own scouts, they began to hear consistent reports of something equally astonishing. They spoke of a vast, powerful city called Mayapures, a place of such immense population and scale that it dwarfed the great cities of Spain itself. These were not ancient myths recounted over campfires, but urgent, contemporary intelligence gathered from local people who claimed to know of its existence. The Spanish chroniclers recorded these descriptions with sober detail, writing of a centralized authority, organized districts, and a populace numbering in the many thousands. For European minds accustomed to cities of stone and mortar, this was proof that a major civilization awaited discovery. The significance of Mayapures lies in this jarring conflict, seemingly credible, first-hand accounts set against a complete absence of the expected evidence. Where explorers anticipated finding grand plazas and pyramids like those in Mexico or Peru, they found only endless, impenetrable green. So what happened to the great city? Modern anthropologists offer a compelling and humbling explanation. The societies of the Amazon and Orinoco basins often built with wood, palm thatch, and earth materials that the rainforest reclaims with breathtaking speed. A settlement of immense size with large communal longhouses, intricate palisades, and cultivated garden cities could thrive for generations. But once abandoned, the relentless humidity, insects, and rapid plant growth would cause it to dissolve back into the forest floor within a century, leaving almost no trace for future archaeologists to find. This theory, supported by recent LiDAR surveys that have revealed vast geometric earthworks hidden under the canopy, fundamentally challenges our definition of a city. Mayapures may not have been a Rome or a Tenochtitlan of stone, but a different urban model entirely, a sprawling, decentralized network of communities woven into the living fabric of the jungle. Its loss is not a mystery of collapse, but a quiet lesson in materials and memory. It forces us to wonder how many other great, populous places have simply melted back into the earth, leaving behind only whispers in explorers' journals. This idea of a city defined by its impermanence stands in stark contrast to our next destination, a place built for eternity from the very bones of the earth, yet lost to history all the same. Mayapures dissolved back into the jungle, a city built from the forest itself. But in the stark, stony mountains of the Balkans, a different kind of loss occurred, a fortress built for war, whose very stones were taken to build a quieter world. The Roman historian Livy, chronicling the empire's relentless expansion, mentions a pivotal siege. In the year 168 before the Common Era, Roman legions closed in on Arch-Synithia, the formidable hill-fort stronghold of the Illyrian king Gentius. This was not a mythical place from poetic scrolls, but a documented military objective in a decisive campaign. Livy records its capture, a key victory that ended the Illyrian kingdom. Yet, despite this precise historical bookmark, the fortress itself has vanished from the landscape. Its precise location remains one of the most frustrating gaps in our understanding of Roman military geography. How does a strategically vital citadel mentioned in a major historical work simply lose its place on the map? The answer lies in the practical fate of conquered places. After the legions moved on, the local population often did not preserve a defeated king's fortress as a monument. Instead, they saw it as a convenient quarry. The well-cut stones of Arch-Synithia's walls and towers would have been systematically dismantled over generations, carted down the mountain to build homes, barns, and churches in the valleys below. What the Romans did not destroy, later builders recycled. This process of reuse erases a site as effectively as any natural disaster, scattering its identity across a dozen villages. Compounding this is the nature of Livy's description itself. Ancient historians wrote to convey political and moral lessons, not to provide future archaeologists with grid coordinates. His mention of Arch-Synithia is topographically vague, likely referring to a general region of rugged highlands rather than a single, pinpointable peak. This has led to an ongoing, quiet debate among Balkan archaeologists. Several imposing hill sites in modern-day Albania and Montenegro show evidence of Illyrian fortification and Roman assault, traces of siegeworks, sling bullets, and broken weapons. Yet, without a definitive inscription or a unique geographical marker that matches Livy's brief account, no scholar can confidently point to one and declare the mystery solved. Each candidate site is a compelling maybe, a piece of a puzzle where the final picture remains just out of view. The story of Arch-Synithia, therefore, is a lesson in the different ways history can be lost. It was not swallowed by sand or jungle, but dismantled stone by stone. Its military significance forgotten as its physical material was absorbed into the daily life of the people who came after. Its memory survives only in a few lines of text, a ghost of a conflict that reshaped the region, waiting for a future discovery to give the fortress back its name. From this vanished bastion of war, our journey turns toward a place built for an entirely opposite purpose, a destination not of conflict, but of profound peace and spiritual longing. The fortress of Arch-Sinithia was dismantled by practical hands, its stones repurposed for a new world, but other cities vanished not from reuse but from a quiet, bureaucratic forgetting. In the rugged highlands of ancient Isauria, in what is now southern Turkey, a different kind of community once thrived. Late Roman and early Byzantine records speak clearly of a bishopric, a place of spiritual authority called Antiochia ad Cragum. This was not the great Syrian metropolis of Antioch, but a smaller, regional counterpart, its very name meaning Antioch by the cliffs. For centuries, it held a seat in important church councils, its bishops signing decrees that shaped early Christian doctrine. Its existence is a documented fact of ecclesiastical history, a dot on the administrative map of a fading empire, and yet today we cannot point to its ruins. How does an entire city, recognized by the highest authorities of its age, simply lose its place on the earth? The answer lies in the slow unraveling of an era. As the Roman Empire contracted and fractured, the intricate networks of trade, governance, and military support that sustained regional centers like Antiochia ad Cragum began to fail. Isauria, always a remote and mountainous province, became increasingly isolated. Pilgrimage routes may have shifted, political power certainly moved elsewhere, and the economic lifeblood that fed the city slowly drained away. A bishopric on paper does not require a bustling metropolis. It can exist as a title long after the community it serves has dwindled or dispersed. The city likely faded from a vibrant pilgrimage center to a modest village, and then, over more centuries, to a memory. The search for its physical remains is a masterclass in historical frustration. Epigraphers, scholars who study ancient inscriptions, have its name firmly in church records. But the landscape of southern Turkey is archaeologically dense, littered with the remains of countless settlements from the classical and Byzantine periods. Distinguishing one ruined town from another is a monumental challenge, especially when many sites share similar names or were renamed over time. Was this cluster of foundations on a hillside merely a fortified village, or was it the lost bishopric? Without a definitive inscription bearing its full name found in situ, any identification remains a hypothesis. This forces a profound reflection on the nature of loss. Antiochia ad Cragum was not swallowed by the sea or buried by sand. It was erased by the mundane forces of administrative neglect and regional decline. Its story reminds us that a city's reality is upheld by a continuous thread of attention by travelers who visit, by scribes who record, by a world that remembers its purpose. When that thread is cut, even a place of documented spiritual significance can dissolve into the landscape, becoming just another set of anonymous stones waiting for a name. This blurring line between a documented city and a possible myth leads us to consider a place that may have never been built of stone at all, a city that exists solely in the realm of sacred story. A bishopric can fade from a crumbling empire's records, but some places are born from the very edge of the known world. Our 13th lost destination begins not with a city, but with an island shrouded in mist and midnight sun. In the 4th century before the Common Era, a Greek explorer named Pytheas of Massalia embarked on an astonishing voyage from the Mediterranean, sailing north past Britain into waters no classical geographer had ever described. When he returned, he wrote of a land he called Thule, an island a 6-day sail from northern Britain. His own account has been lost to time, but other ancient writers, like the Roman historian Tacitus, preserved fragments of his report. Pytheas described a place where the summer sun barely dipped below the horizon, creating a night of lingering twilight. He wrote of a congealed sea, a phrase later scholars believe referred to the pack ice or slushy marine conditions near the Arctic Circle. This was not a description of a mythical paradise, but a traveler's honest attempt to document the bewildering extremes of a northern latitude. Thule, in its first incarnation, was almost certainly a real place Pythias either reached or heard of from local sailors, likely the coast of Norway, the Shetland Islands, or even Iceland. It was the ultimate edge of the habitable world for the classical mind. Yet, this geographical reality could not survive the journey into legend. Later Roman and medieval writers, who had never ventured so far north, took Pythias's sober observations and transformed them. Thule became a symbolic place, a mythical utopia at the very rim of the map, a land of perpetual mystery. Cartographers, working from centuries-old texts rather than fresh exploration, began to place it on their maps as a fixed point in a nebulous northern ocean, its location shifting with each new interpretation. It was lost in plain sight, a phantom pinned to parchment. This evolution from reported location to literary concept is the true mystery of Thule. The quotes preserved from Pythias's lost work are the tantalizing fuel. He reportedly wrote of a place where earth, air, and sea seemed to blend into one substance, a description that perfectly captures the disorientation of encountering sea ice for the first time. But without his original text, these fragments became seeds for imagination. Was Thule the last outpost of human habitation, or the gateway to a frozen void? The question ceased to be geographical and became philosophical. Thule's legacy, therefore, is a lesson in how exploration breeds myth. A real discovery, too strange for the home audience to fully comprehend, is gradually polished into a symbol. It becomes less about where it is and more about what it represents: the limit of knowledge, the promise of the unknown, the edge beyond which stories must take over from facts. This same transformation from tangible discovery to enduring legend would happen again, not in the frozen north, but in the vast, sun-drenched expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Thule was a real horizon that became a legend, but for the Maori people of New Zealand, their legendary homeland is a compass point woven into the very fabric of their identity. This is Hawaii, the ancestral homeland across the sea. It is not a city of stone, but a living memory carried in the waves. In chants, genealogies, and oral histories passed down for centuries, Hawaii is described with a richness that feels tangible, a place of specific plants like the fragrant karaka tree and distinct landmarks. It is the origin point from which the great migration canoes like the Arawa and the Tainui set sail, navigating by the stars to reach Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. The profound significance of Hawaii lies in its beautiful dual nature. For generations, it has been understood as a real geographical location, a set of islands that skilled navigators could theoretically sail back to using the same celestial pathways. Yet, simultaneously, it is a spiritual realm, the final resting place of the soul after death, where ancestors return. This is not a contradiction in Maori thought, but a harmonious layering of meaning. So, was Hawaii a specific place on a map? Many scholars and Polynesian navigators, like the late master navigator Hector Busby, point to islands in the Central Pacific, such as Raiatea in the Society Islands, as a likely candidate. Raiatea was once a major cultural and religious center, whose original name, Hawaii, is linguistically identical to Hawaii. This connection suggests a real point of departure, a hub from which explorers fanned out across the ocean. The journey itself is the key to understanding. Modern voyages using traditional, star-guided canoes without instruments or charts have successfully retraced possible migration routes from central Polynesia to New Zealand. These voyages prove that such a journey was not only possible but repeatable, turning the epic poetry of the chants into a demonstrable feat of human ingenuity and courage. Yet, for all this tangible connection, Hawaii also transcends geography. Anthropologists note that as generations grew more distant from the original migration, the homeland evolved in collective memory. It became a conceptual touchstone, a symbol of origin, belonging, and continuity. To ask for the single, physical location of Hawaii might be to miss its deeper cultural purpose. It is both a historical port and a timeless idea, the source from which a people draw their strength and identity. This deep, layered cultural memory stands in stark contrast to our final mystery, a city that vanished not from the fluid world of oral tradition, but from the meticulous, written records of one of history's most famously organized empires. Hawaii lives in the memory of a people, a spiritual homeland carried across the ocean. But within the rigid, documented bureaucracy of the Aztec Empire, a different kind of city was lost, not to the sea of time, but to the deliberate erasure of conquest. This is the mystery of Xochitlan. Unlike the mythical Aztlán, Xochitlan was not a place of legend. It was a provincial capital, a cog in the immense administrative machine of the Triple Alliance. Its name appears in tribute records, listed alongside the exact quantities of cotton, maize, and warrior costumes it was required to send to the imperial heart at Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs were meticulous accountants, and their pictographic codices document such centers of control with practical clarity. Xochitlan was a real place on a tax collector's map. Yet, ask a modern archaeologist to point to its ruins, and you will likely be met with a thoughtful, unresolved silence. How does a city, recorded for the very purpose of governance and exploitation, simply vanish from geography? The answer lies in the brutal efficiency of the Spanish conquest and the relentless overlay of a new world. When Cortés and his allies dismantled the Aztec imperial structure, they did not just topple gods and kings, they systematically targeted the nodes of power. A provincial capital like Xochitlan, a symbol of Aztec authority, would have been a prime target for demolition or repurposing. Its temples were torn down, its central plaza might have been rebuilt with a Spanish church, and its original Nahuatl name was often replaced with a Spanish saint's name or forgotten entirely. The new colonial town, built literally from the stones of the old, grew over the centuries, completely burying the pre-Hispanic footprint under layers of cobblestone, concrete, and modern life. This creates a unique challenge for scholars. Finding Xochitlan is not a matter of scanning empty jungles with LiDAR. It is a painstaking, paper-based detective story conducted by ethnohistorians. These researchers work by cross-referencing the pictorial glyphs in Aztec codices with the dense, handwritten Spanish colonial land records, known as Relations Geographicas. They search for correlations between an ancient place glyph and an early colonial town's description of its founding, looking for hints in the landscape, a mention of a particular hill, a spring, or a boundary that matches the older account. It is slow, meticulous work, piecing together a puzzle where half the pieces are in one language and pictorial system, and the other half are in another. The reflective question this poses is quietly profound. If a documented, functional capital like Xochitlan can be so completely absorbed that its location is debated, how many other such administrative centers are waiting to be rediscovered, not under sand or jungle, but under the streets and plazas of modern towns and cities across Mexico? Each one is a silent layer of history, a complete chapter of daily life, governance, and culture, pressed flat beneath the weight of what came after. This final case shifts our perspective entirely. It shows that a city can be lost not because it was forgotten, but because it was too successfully overwritten. Having journeyed through 15 specific enigmas, from golden legends to tax records, a broader pattern comes into focus. The real story is no longer about any single lost city, but about the search itself, the methods, mindsets, and technologies we use to try and pull these vanished worlds back from the void. The meticulous search for a city like Xochitlan reveals a fundamental truth. Finding what is lost requires far more than a map and a compass. It demands an entire toolbox of technologies and a scholar's patient resolve. The quest for these vanished places has evolved dramatically, from the fatal treasure hunts of conquistadors to a sophisticated, interdisciplinary science. Today's seekers are not lone adventurers with dreams of gold, but collaborative teams of archaeologists, historians, and technologists, armed with devices that see through time itself. The most revolutionary tool in this modern arsenal is remote sensing. From hundreds of miles in space, satellites equipped with multispectral imaging can detect subtle differences in vegetation health or soil moisture. A stone foundation buried just beneath the surface will affect how plants grow above it, creating a spectral signature invisible to the human eye but clear to a satellite's sensors. Archaeologist Sarah Parcak, a pioneer in this field, has used this technology to identify thousands of potential sites across the globe, from Roman villas in Italy to Viking settlements in Newfoundland. She describes it as giving the entire planet a gentle X-ray, revealing the ghostly footprints of human activity hidden in plain sight. For sites swallowed by dense forest, another technology takes over: LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Mounted on aircraft, LiDAR scanners fire millions of laser pulses through the jungle canopy. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, they can strip away the vegetation digitally, creating a stunningly detailed three-dimensional map of the ground surface below. This is how the lost Maya city of Ocamtan was recently discovered in the Mexican jungle. What appeared from the ground to be an unbroken green wilderness was revealed from the air to be a sprawling urban center with pyramids, plazas, and a complex network of causeways. LiDAR does not just find a single building, it maps an entire lost landscape. Once a promising site is identified from the air, the work moves to the ground with tools like ground-penetrating radar. This device sends radio waves into the earth, painting a picture of what lies beneath without digging a single hole. It can reveal the outlines of walls, the presence of voids like tombs, and even ancient roadways. In the search for a place like Iram of the Pillars, such technology is invaluable for surveying vast desert areas, helping to distinguish between a natural rock formation and the buried geometry of human construction. Yet, for all this technological wonder, the most crucial tools are often the most traditional: a knowledge of languages and a deep reading of texts. The painstaking translation of a single word in a crumbling manuscript can redirect a search entirely. Interdisciplinary teams now combine geology to understand ancient landscapes, linguistics to trace the evolution of place names, and climatology to model how environments have changed. The search for Mayapures in the Amazon, for instance, relies as much on reanalyzing the journals of Raleigh and Barrio as it does on scanning the canopy. It is a dialogue between the digital and the documentary, where a satellite image confirms a detail from a 500-year-old chronicle. This modern, methodical approach stands in stark contrast to the quests of the past, which were so often driven by greed and ended in profound hardship. The shift is not merely in tools but in intent. The goal is no longer extraction but understanding, not to claim treasure but to recover a story. So we must ask, with all this power to see the invisible, why does the search continue to captivate us? What is it we are truly hoping to find when we look for a city that the world has forgotten? The search itself, with all its modern tools, is ultimately driven by a force far older than any satellite. Our journey through these 15 lost cities reveals a profound truth. History is not just written in stone and parchment, but also in the gaps and silences between them. Each blank space on the map, each name without a location, is not an empty void. It is a question, an invitation. These vanished places teach us something essential about ourselves. They speak to the impermanence of even our grandest achievements. The mightiest fortress can be dismantled for its stones, the richest trading hub can wither when the roads change, and a metropolis of wood and earth can melt back into the forest as if it were never there. Our civilizations, for all their power, are temporary arrangements, always in a delicate conversation with the environment, with neighbors, and with time itself. Yet their disappearance is never the end of the story. This is where the second great lesson lies, in the incredible power of narrative. A city swallowed by a desert storm becomes a moral parable about humility. A golden ritual transforms into a kingdom that drives exploration across a continent. A spiritual homeland evolves into a guiding star for an entire culture. The facts may fade, but the story adapts, grows, and endures, often becoming more powerful and meaningful than the original settlement ever was. This enduring desire to complete the map of our past, to fill in those blanks, is perhaps the most human impulse of all. It is a blend of curiosity, reverence, and a deep-seated need for connection. We look for these lost cities not merely to catalogue ruins, but to recover lost chapters of the human experience. We want to know how they lived, what they believed, and why they faded. In doing so, we better understand the long, winding path that led to our present. Whether swallowed by sand, sea, or jungle, or simply forgotten beneath newer streets, each of these places leaves behind a legacy of wonder. They remind us that our world is still full of mysteries, that history is a living puzzle with pieces still waiting to be found. The greatest discoveries, from Troy to the Maya cities, often begin not with a shovel, but with a legend, a single line in an old book, a story told around a fire. That spark of curiosity is where every adventure begins. If you found these mysteries captivating, we would love to hear which lost city calls to you most. Would you search for the library in the sands of Zerzura, or follow the Viking sagas to the shores of Hóp? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to delve deeper into history's hidden chapters with us. The map is never complete, and the next great story is still out there waiting.